Look up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a 50-story building collapsing on top of me. Run away! Run away! Man of Steel. Superman has had a long and storied career in live action. From serials in the 40s to the syndicated adventures of Superman in the 50s to the movie starring Christopher Reeve to Superboy on television in the late 80s, then Lois and Clark in the 90s, Smallville in the 2000s to a long and protracted attempt to make a film starring Nick Cage. And then Superman Returns in 2006. But it took a particularly dark take on Batman and a resurgent Marvel to really put the wind up Warner Brothers and DC. DC had great success with Christopher Nolan's serious take on Batman and thought, maybe we should do that with Superman. With no one to talk them off the ledge, they tapped Zack Snyder to direct their reboot of Superman, with Christopher Nolan around to keep an eye on things. Snyder, who'd had great success with 300, but then also made Watchmen a critical success but a commercial failure, and the plain pointless films Sucker Punch and Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. Warner Brothers at the time was a studio that liked to think of itself as somewhere where serious filmmakers could make films rather than churn out junk like a TV director. Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy was a fairly sharp contrast to the lighter tone of most movies based on Marvel properties. Here was a superhero film that played it so amazingly straight, treated the cartoon villains as though they were utterly real, and dared to delve into the psyche of the tortured hero that no previous version had ever done satisfactorily. Now, that suits Batman since the comics had portrayed him that way for decades. The question was, would that work with the Superman film? Superman, the optimistic Boy Scout. We know the answer, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Man of Steel starts with a lengthy prologue on Krypton. From the outset, Snyder makes sure you don't mistake this for the Krypton from 1978 Superman. Instead of bright and light, everything is dark and grey. Instead of starchy and pompous, well, it's just a different type of pompous. Russell Crowe is Jor-El, the Kryptonian man about town who's failed to convince Krypton's leaders that the planet is doomed. Apparently, he sent an email but forgot to CC everyone. He and his wife Lara have recently had a baby, Cal, and for whatever reason, their baby is different from other Kryptonian tots and carries the genetic code of Krypton within his DNA. Like other rich folk with plummy accents, he sends his kid off to boarding school on Earth. Meanwhile, General Zod agrees with Jor-El that Krypton is doomed, but he thinks he should stage a coup instead. But his insurgency fails and he and his followers are sentenced to, be shot off into space, imprisoned in capsules, I guess disguised as giant sex toys. Look, I'm told it's a comfy ride, but the vibration is killer. Krypton is destroyed anyway, so baby Kal-El might have to stay at school for Easter holidays. In another break with the Richard Donner film, Kal-El's childhood on Earth is broken up and told out of chronological order, flashing backwards and forward like a drunken time traveler with short-term memory problems. Cal's pod lands in Smallville, Kansas, and baby Cal was found and raised by a bunch of Kents, Jonathan and Martha, as their angsty son, Clark. Pa Kent wants Clark to hide his abilities so as to not raise suspicions, but for whatever reason, Smallville is a hub for bad stuff to happen. Jonathan is so adamant that angsty Clark not show off his powers that he heroically, and let's be honest, comically lays down his life in a rightfully derided scene. People forget that the exact same death was seen earlier in the film for Cal's mother. Anywho, Clark goes on an angsty journey to find himself and finds an abandoned Kryptonian scout vessel in the Arctic at the same time as nosy reporter Lois Lane. Amy Adams' Lois Lane is a proper journalist here, a fearless war correspondent, and has a neat line in small talk at parties.
What if I need to tinkle?
Lois is injured and saved by Clark, but he disappears before she can fully recover. She wants to tell his story, but her editor, Perry White, will have none of it as his paper doesn't need to print unsubstantiated made-up bullshit because Uncle Jack's Facebook already has that covered. Lois follows Clark's trail back to Smallville, where Clark angsts some more. Zod and crew appear to give Earth an ultimatum: hand over Kal-El or face the consequences. Then basically lots of big battles, cities crumble, and necks are snapped. Henry Cavill's Superman is, well, super. Henry Cavill is good as Clark and Superman, though there's barely a difference between the two in terms of characterization. The one new element is that as Superman, there's a weariness. When he's trying to reassure the humans about his good intentions, he always seems a bit annoyed that no one trusts him.
I'm here to help, but it has to be on my own terms.
While we do see Clark do the odd good deed during his travels, no one sees him as Superman in the suit until he gets into a knockdown brawl that takes apart first Smallville and then levels Metropolis, and apparently Gotham City, which is next door. So why the hell wouldn't the army be shitting themselves over this guy? Supes goes commando in a really dark blue suit with desaturated colours. In fact, this film really seems to want to get away from a lot of Superman stuff, almost as if Zack Snyder was, I don't know, embarrassed to be making a Superman film. The Owl film was fine, but Superman, ooh, yeesh.
What's the S stand for?
It's not an S.
Here, it's an S.
It's not an S.
Sir?
Amy Adams is Lois Lane, still a hard-nosed reporter with moxie and gumption. And for once, the secret identity thing isn't a thing for the most part.
The only way you could disappear for good is to stop helping people altogether, and I sense that's not an option for you.
Lois, as played by Amy Adams, is much more amiable than Kate Bosworth. Sorry, that should be Amiable Adamsable.
I was bred to be a warrior, Cal. Trained my entire life to master my senses. Where did you train? On a farm?
Now, an unpopular opinion about Zod. He's not great. Michael Shannon is normally a terrific actor, and if you want proof, you need to see him in almost anything else, particularly Boardwalk Empire. But here, he's got way too much dialogue. He over-explains things again and again. In fact, this film has a big problem with going over the same ground several times, almost like they expect audiences to be unable to remember a massive set piece they watched 30 minutes earlier. Compared to Terrence Stamp's Zod, who kept a lid on his energy for the most part, so when he exploded, it had all the more impact, Shannon's Zod seems like he's on the edge of having a mental breakdown all the time. All that's missing is for the men in the white coats to drag him away. Oh, actually, Zod wants to reclaim the genetic code of Krypton that's baked into Superman, but Superman isn't interested in giving it up since there's a bullshit restocking fee.
I have a duty to my people, and I will not allow anyone to prevent me from carrying it out.
In fact, a common theme of the film seems to be people with chips on their shoulder. Clark finds his adoptive dad's attitude towards him using his powers is a pain in the ass. Superman is weary about the human military not trusting him. Lois starts a conversation with some soldiers who are being civil to her by spitting back.
So if we're done measuring dicks?
Zod has a chip on his shoulder about Jor-El and decides taking out on the dude's son halfway across the galaxy is perfectly rational. Man of Steel moves further away from the Reeves film with Hans Zimmer's bombastic percussion-heavy score. Instead of John Williams' rousing melody, we have a melancholic series of chords. The action and staging, always Snyder's forte, are very well done here. But there was no thought about the ramifications of Superman even accidentally leveling a city. People did notice. Man of Steel quickly came under fire for its disaster porn ending, where Zod's destruction of Metropolis came to be blamed on Superman. Superman might have made more of an effort to lead Zod away from the cities, but disaster porn is hard to film in a desert. The stakes have to be high, otherwise why bother? Then of course, Supes has to resort to killing Zod in order to stop his killing spree, or maybe just to shut him up. So what's good and bad about Man of Steel? The cast and acting are mostly great, but I've said I'm not a huge fan of this version of Zod. The script and dialogue is solid enough, with a few caveats here and there, and the story mostly holds up. Special effects and action are beautifully done. The ending does get a bit bloated and drags on a bit. The destruction of Metropolis is probably just a bridge too far. Zod's neck snapped, it did stop more people from getting killed. This film does leave a slightly bitter aftertaste. Like if you're used to Sprite and then you try Sprite Zero for the first time. It's okay for about 3 seconds and then that weird aftertaste hits you and you instantly have regrets. So we have a melancholic Superman who doesn't seem to find much joy in the world apart from being in the arms of Lois Lane, which seems like a happy place to be. Superman in a world that's not really cool with him, and fans who aren't really down with him. Spare a thought for apparent photojournalist Jimmy Olsen, who just signed a lease on a downtown studio apartment before Zod leveled his neighborhood. He's had a hard time lately, so I really hope his luck improves in the next film.
Shall I tell the General you're unwilling to comply?
I don't care what you tell him.
The film did well enough on its release in 2013 for Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers to say, hey, we want that Avengers cash now. So almost immediately, Snyder announced that the next film would not be a Man of Steel 2, but instead, Batman v Superman. It's at this point the story goes a little caca, but we'll look at that later. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.